Jack Walters lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood where lawns were perfectly trimmed, mailboxes were color-matched, and the HOA kept everything in uniform order. For years, he had no issues with them. He paid his dues on time, attended the occasional meeting, and kept his property in top condition. But everything changed the morning he decided to mount a large American flag on his front porch. Jack had been away for months on an overseas work assignment. Coming home felt special, and hanging the flag was his way of honoring that feeling. It wasn't a holiday, but to Jack, patriotism didn't need a calendar date. The flag was new, crisp, and properly installed. No loose bolts or sagging edges. It waved proudly over his well-manicured lawn. 3 days later, a letter arrived from the HOA, in bold lettering. It declared his flag non-compliant with community guidelines and ordered its removal within 10 days. Jack thought it had to be a mistake. After all, several neighbors displayed flags during national holidays. His was no different, just a little earlier and perhaps a little bigger. When Jack called the HOA office, he discovered that a single complaint had triggered the warning. It came from Karen Ellis, a neighbor infamous for nitpicking every minor infraction. Karen had lived in the neighborhood for nearly a decade and treated HOA bylaws as if they were sacred law. She routinely reported everything from lawn ornaments to slightly faded paint. To her, Jack's flag was unsightly and distracting from the community aesthetic. Jack was irritated but not worried. He believed the issue could be resolved quickly. He even sent the board a letter citing state law, protecting the right to display the national flag. But Karen was relentless. She called an emergency HOA meeting, pressing the board to fine Jack if he didn't comply. Within a week, Jack received a second letter, this one threatening $100 per day in fines if the flag remained. It was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a battle. Karen began walking by Jack's house daily, phone in hand, snapping pictures as if she were gathering evidence. Some neighbors whispered that she had nothing better to do. Others quietly told Jack they supported him. A few even hinted that they might raise flags of their own if Karen kept pushing. The flag quickly became more than a personal statement. It turned into a symbol of defiance against unreasonable control. Drivers slowed down to admire it. Some honked in support. Jack noticed neighbors who usually kept to themselves stopping by to offer encouragement. Karen's efforts to isolate him were backfiring. But Karen didn't back down. She doubled her complaints, claiming the flagpole was unsafe, too tall, and not approved by the HOA Design Committee. The board, wary of her constant pressure, issued a final certified letter threatening legal action. Jack now had a choice: remove the flag to avoid fines, or stand his ground and prepare for a fight. For him, it was no longer about a piece of fabric fluttering in the breeze. It was about principle, and the growing sense that the entire neighborhood was watching to see what he would do. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the quiet street, Jack knew the conflict was far from over. Karen had turned a simple flag into a neighborhood spectacle, and she had no idea what kind of resistance she had awakened. The next chapter wouldn't just test Jack's resolve. It would test the unity of the entire community. The morning after the certified letter arrived, Jack found himself at the center of unexpected attention. Word about the dispute spread faster than he could have imagined. Some neighbors quietly left supportive notes in his mailbox, thanking him for standing up against the HOA. Others were less subtle. Flags began appearing on porches, fences, and front yards all over the neighborhood. What began as one man's small act of pride had sparked a movement. Karen was furious. She saw the growing number of flags as a personal challenge to her authority. She marched door to door, warning residents that violations would not be tolerated. But her efforts were met with polite refusals, cold stares, or closed doors. People were tired of her meddling. For years, she had gotten away with bullying individuals one at a time, but now the community was uniting against her. The HOA board was caught in the middle. Most members had no interest in fighting their own residents, but Karen dominated every meeting with her relentless complaints. She insisted that allowing Jack's flag to stay would open the floodgates to other rule-breaking. She painted a picture of chaos: unapproved decorations, mismatched fences, and property values plummeting. Jack, meanwhile, stayed calm, methodical. He kept records of every letter, every photograph Karen took, and every law protecting his right to display the flag. He even consulted an attorney, who confirmed that the HOA had no legal standing to force its removal. If they tried to fine him, they'd be the ones breaking the law. Despite this, Karen continued her campaign. She wrote lengthy emails to the entire HOA mailing list, calling Jack uncooperative and disrespectful. She even accused him of inciting rebellion in the neighborhood, but her words only pushed people further away. Residents who had once remained neutral were now openly supporting Jack. A turning point came when local media got wind of the story. A neighbor, frustrated with Karen's antics, tipped off a small news outlet about the flag dispute. Within days, a reporter showed up at Jack's front door to interview him. The article that followed painted a picture of a quiet man standing up for his rights against an overbearing HOA. The story spread on social media, attracting thousands of supportive comments. Karen hated every second of it. She called the article fake news and demanded the HOA release a public statement condemning Jack. But by now, even the board was growing wary of her. They worried about how they would look if they kept pushing a fight they couldn't win. Still, Karen didn't stop. She threatened to hire her own lawyer, convinced she could make Jack's life miserable through sheer persistence. She began showing up outside his house more frequently, documenting every angle of his property. Neighbors started filming her behavior, posting clips online with captions mocking her obsession. The more she tried to control the situation, the more it spiraled beyond her reach. By the end of the month, nearly half the homes in the community were flying flags in solidarity. The HOA's threats of fines became meaningless. They couldn't possibly punish everyone. The board's unity fractured, with several members openly opposing Karen in meetings. Jack knew the conflict was reaching a breaking point. The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for the following week, and it promised to be explosive. Residents planned to attend in large numbers, some for the first time ever. Karen was preparing for battle, convinced she still had control. But what Karen didn't realize was that her grip on the neighborhood was already gone. The stage was set for a showdown that would determine not just whether Jack could keep his flag, but whether Karen's reign over the community would finally come to an end. The night of the HOA meeting, the usually quiet clubhouse parking lot was overflowing with cars. Residents who rarely attended had shown up in droves, many carrying small flags of their own as a show of solidarity. The atmosphere was tense but electric. It was clear that the neighborhood had grown tired of being pushed around. Jack arrived early, calm and prepared. He brought a folder containing state laws, HOA bylaws, and a letter from his attorney confirming his right to display the flag. Karen arrived soon after, visibly agitated, clutching a stack of complaints and photographs she had gathered over the past month. She expected to rally the board to her side, as she always had, but the mood in the room felt different. People were whispering, shaking their heads, and glaring at her as she walked in. The meeting began with Karen speaking first. She launched into a long tirade about community standards, property values, and unchecked violations. She waved her photos in the air and accused Jack of turning the neighborhood into a circus. But as she spoke, the crowd grew restless. Murmurs filled the room, and several neighbors openly rolled their eyes. When it was Jack's turn to speak, he didn't raise his voice. He simply laid out the facts: the state law protecting the display of the national flag, the harassment he had endured, and the legal risk the HOA would face if they continued threatening fines. He also pointed out that nearly half the community was now displaying flags, meaning the board would have to fine dozens of families if they followed Karen's demands. One by one, residents stood up to voice their support. Elderly couples, young parents, veterans, all spoke about how unfairly Jack had been treated. Some shared their own stories of Karen's constant nitpicking and bullying. The board members sat silently, realizing the tide had turned completely. When the HOA president finally called for a vote, the decision was unanimous. Jack could keep his flag, and the HOA would no longer pursue fines or legal action against any homeowner displaying one. The crowd erupted in applause. Karen sat frozen, her face pale with anger and disbelief. For years she had ruled the neighborhood with fear and paperwork, but tonight her power crumbled. She stormed out of the meeting before it ended, ignoring the neighbors who now openly mocked her. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the neighborhood shifted. More flags appeared, not just in solidarity with Jack, but as a reminder that the HOA was meant to serve the community, not control it. Karen stopped her morning inspection walks, and rumors swirled that she was considering moving away. Jack, for his part, didn't gloat. He kept his flag flying high, just as he always had, but he went back to living quietly, mowing his lawn and chatting with neighbors. The fight had never been about winning or embarrassing anyone. It had been about standing up for something that mattered. And in doing so, Jack had not only defended his own rights, but helped an entire neighborhood remember that rules should protect people, not oppress them. The flag kept waving in the breeze, brighter than ever. And Karen? She never complained about it again.